I'm 45 years old, sitting alone in a Brooklyn brownstone worth $3 million, and I can't remember the last time I felt anything except empty. 16 years ago, I won. I destroyed the man who spent 17 years treating me like I was nothing. I proved that the poor son-in-law he bet would fail had secretly built hidden assets worth $120 million. I revealed that while he was picking up checks and reminding me of my place, I was quietly buying more of his company than he owned. The family feud between Harrison Ashford and me ended with his total defeat, and it cost me everything that actually mattered. This is one of those Reddit stories about revenge that sounds too calculated to be real, about concealed wealth and patient rage, about a father-in-law conflict that became a 17-year war of secret investments and silent accumulation, about winning so completely that you realize, too late, you were fighting the wrong battle all along. They say the best revenge is living well. They're wrong. The best revenge is learning you never needed it. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where this family power struggle truly began, not with hatred, but with love. December 2007. I was 28 and unemployed for 3 months after the tech startup I'd joined imploded. The CEO had gambling debts he'd hidden from investors. The whole thing collapsed overnight. I met Vivian Ashford at a charity gala. I was there helping my roommate cater the event. She was there because her father, shipping magnate Harrison Ashford, had donated $50,000 and expected the family to attend. She stood by the bar looking trapped, and I made a stupid joke about the ice sculpture of a yacht melting into the floor. She laughed, really laughed, and we talked for 3 hours about everything except money. We fell in love fast. Maybe too fast. But when you're 28 and broke and a woman like Vivienne looks at you like you're the only person in the room, you don't question it. Harrison hated me on sight. Our first dinner was at his Park Avenue penthouse. Crystal chandeliers, original Rothko on the wall, a view of Central Park that probably cost more than my parents' house. "What do you do, Garrett?" Harrison asked over the appetizer, the way a prosecutor asks a defendant to explain their alibi. "I'm between positions right now. I was with a tech startup that recently closed, but I'm exploring opportunities." "So you're unemployed?" Not a question. A classification. A verdict. He looked at Vivian with the expression of a man watching his daughter pick up roadkill. "You know, your mother and I always hoped you'd meet someone established, someone from a good family." "Garrett's family is perfectly fine," Vivian said, her jaw tight. "I'm sure they are." Harrison's smile was surgical. "I just mean someone from our world. Someone who understands how things work. Our world." Those 2 words became the prison I'd spend the next 17 years trying to escape. I got a job 2 weeks later, junior analyst at an investment firm, $72,000 a year. It felt like winning the lottery. Harrison's response when I told him? 72,000. Well, it's a start, I suppose. But I could have lived with the condescension, could have lived with being looked down on. It was the engagement party that changed everything. March 2008. The engagement party was at the Plaza Hotel. 200 guests, open bar, a string quartet that probably cost more than my yearly salary. Harrison cornered me in a private room away from the celebration. He had a manila envelope in his hand, thick with legal documents. "Given your, situation, we need protections." Inside was a prenuptial agreement. The numbers burned into my brain. If the marriage ended in the first 5 years, Vivian would receive $1.2 million. After 10 years, $3 million, and there was a clause. This was the part that made my hand shake, about my inability to maintain a standard of living appropriate to the Ashford family. "What does that mean?" I asked. Harrison poured himself a scotch. Didn't offer me one. "It means if you can't provide for my daughter the way she deserves, the marriage can be dissolved with appropriate compensation. For her trouble. for her trouble, like marrying me was a burden she needed to be paid to endure. She loves me, I said quietly. I'm sure she does. Young love is charming. He handed me a pen. But love and suitability are different things. You seem like a decent young man, Garrett. Hard worker, good intentions. But my daughter is accustomed to a certain life. If you can't provide that. He shrugged. Well, that's what this is for. I should have walked away. Looking back now, standing in my empty brownstone, I can see the exit door was right there. I could have told Harrison to keep his money and his daughter and his whole world. Could have found a woman who didn't. Come with a father who treated me like hired help. But then I thought about Vivian downstairs, laughing with her friends, about the life we'd planned, about the way she looked at me like I was enough. And I thought about Harrison's certainty, his absolute, unshakable conviction that I would fail. That's when something crystallized inside me. Not anger, something colder, something patient. I signed the prenup. But I also made a decision that night that would consume the next 17 years of my life. I decided to prove Harrison Ashford wrong so completely, so utterly, so devastatingly that he'd spend the rest of his life knowing he'd underestimated me. I decided to win this family feud not with words, but with hidden assets he'd never see coming. What I didn't know yet was the price I'd pay. Not in money, I'd have plenty of that, but in everything else. In the man I'd become. In the marriage I'd destroy. In the years I'd never get back. Harrison was betting I'd quit, that I'd take some settlement money and disappear. He was right about one thing. This was a bet. He just didn't know I was playing a completely different game. 3 weeks after I signed that prenup, something happened that would make everything possible. My grandmother died. Ruth Thorne had made a fortune in real estate during the 1970s and 80s, bought buildings in Brooklyn when nobody wanted them, held on through the crack epidemic, and sold at exactly the right moment. She'd never remarried after my grandfather died, never had other grandchildren, and I was the only one who visited her every week in the nursing home, even when the smell of disinfectant and death made my stomach turn. She left me everything, $15 million. I told Vivian I'd inherited some money, never said how much. The first rule of building concealed wealth, keep your cards close. The second rule, get expert help. I called a lawyer named Tom Desmond, Harvard Law, 89, specialist in shell companies and asset protection. We met in his office overlooking Madison Avenue. He was expensive. Worth it. I want to buy controlling interest in Ashford Maritime without anyone knowing, I said. I need to build hidden assets through disguised ownership structures, anonymous ownership that nobody can trace back to me. Tom leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. You're talking about a long-term strategy. Very long-term. Years, possibly decades. It's legal, completely legal, but it requires patience most people don't have. I have patience. Your father-in-law owns 38% of the company? Correct. Then you'd need to acquire at least 40% to have effective control. Ashford Maritime has roughly 1.8 million shares outstanding. You'd need about 720,000 shares. At current prices, around $78 per share, he calculated. You're looking at $56 million in capital. I have $15 million to start. Then you'll need the market to cooperate. A crisis. Something that drops the price and lets you accumulate shares cheaply. We spent 3 months building the infrastructure. 3 Delaware LLCs with different registered agents, a trust in Nevada, a holding company in Wyoming, each layer designed to maintain privacy, each structure perfectly legal. We created investor profiles, a pension fund, a family office, a small investment firm. No single entity would ever exceed the 4.9% ownership threshold that required public disclosure. And then we waited. Harrison offered me a job at Ashford Maritime in June 2008. Something entry-level, he said. Maybe you'll learn the business. I took it. $85,000 a year to work in acquisitions, 3 levels below anyone who mattered. Everyone knew I was the son-in-law. Some pitied me, most avoided me. But working there gave me something priceless. Information. I learned the company inside and out, the shipping routes, the contracts, the board politics, who really made decisions, where the vulnerabilities were, and I waited for the crisis I knew was coming. Read 10:15 in the 2008 crisis, my opportunity to strike. September 15th, 2008. Lehman Brothers collapsed. The financial markets went into freefall. I watched CNBC from my cubicle at Ashford Maritime as the Dow dropped 500 points in a single day. Ashford's stock, which had been trading at $78, fell to $65, then $52, then $41. Harrison appeared on the news that night, projecting confidence. Ashford Maritime has weathered storms before. Our fundamentals are strong. This is a temporary correction. The stock hit $31 by October. Then $25. I called Tom. Now, you sure? It could drop further. That's fine. We're not day trading. We're accumulating. This is stealth accumulation for the 16-year long game. Through our network of shell companies, we began purchasing shares. Never more than 1,800 shares in a single transaction, just under the reporting threshold. We spread purchases across all our entities. To any observer, it looked like random market activity, not coordinated acquisition. October 2008, we bought 127,000 shares at an average price of $27. Cost, $3.4 million. November 2008, another 89,000 shares at $23 cost, $2.1 million. December 2008, 71,000 shares at $29 cost, $2.1 million. Total shares acquired during the crisis, 287,000. Total investment, $7.6 million. Average cost, $26.48 per share. By February 2009, the stock had stabilized around $38. Our position was already worth $10.9 million. We'd gained $3.3 million in 4 months while everyone else was panicking. But more importantly, we now owned 15.9% of Ashford Maritime, hidden across 9 different entities, invisible, patient. At Sunday dinners, Harrison would complain about bottom feeders buying up shares during the crisis. Vultures, he called them. No loyalty, no understanding of what we're building. I'd nod sympathetically, pass the potatoes, and say nothing. Vivienne would squeeze my hand under the table, thinking I was being patient with her difficult father. She had no idea I was one of the vultures he was complaining about. The billionaire playing pauper had just made his opening move. Harrison Ashford owned 38% of his company. I owned 16% and growing. He had 17 more years to figure it out. He never did. The plan was working perfectly. The covert financial strategy was invisible. My secret investments were compounding. What I didn't see yet, what I wouldn't see for years, was what this strategy was costing me, not in money, in something far more valuable. But I'm getting ahead of myself again. First, let me show you what 16 years of hidden assets and silent warfare looks like. Let me show you how the family power struggle consumed everything it touched. Let me show you the man I became. For 16 years, I lived 2 completely different lives. During the day, I was Garrett Thorne, the mediocre middle manager at Ashford Maritime, J. Crew suits from the outlet mall, subway commute, brown bag lunches. By 2015, I was making $127,000, decent money, but nothing special in Manhattan. I was pleasant, unremarkable, forgettable, exactly what I needed to be. At night, after Vivian went to sleep, I'd spend 2 hours in the study managing a portfolio that had grown from $15 million to $94 million by 2015. Through our network of shell companies, we'd accumulated shares through every market dip, every crisis, every moment of panic. The 2011 European debt crisis, the 2015 Chinese stock market crash. Each crisis was another opportunity for stealth accumulation. The strategy wasn't genius. It was patience. buy undervalued assets, hold through volatility, reinvest dividends, never panic, never brag, never slip. By 2018, I owned 38.7% of Ashford Maritime, spread across 9 different entities. Harrison owned 38.1%. We were almost even, and he had no idea I existed as a threat. My undisclosed holdings had reached $78 million. The man who Harrison Ashford thought made $127,000 a year was actually worth more than most of the people at his country club. But the intergenerational rivalry wasn't just about money. It was about respect, about dignity, about 17 years of small humiliations that Harrison delivered with surgical precision. On every Sunday dinner at Harrison's penthouse, the same ritual. The check arrives, Harrison's hand reaches for it before I can move. "I'll get this one, Garrett." Not asking, announcing, his credit card, his treat, his reminder that I couldn't afford it anyway. Every family gathering, every celebration, every casual lunch, his hand, his money, his subtle message that I was a guest in his world, not a member of it. The worst moment came in 2014 at a charity gala. Harrison was speaking on stage about family values and building lasting legacies. "My daughter Vivian is here tonight with her husband Garrett," he announced, gesturing to our table. The spotlight swung toward us. "Garrett's a good man, solid, dependable, the kind of guy you want in middle management." The room laughed politely. Vivian squeezed my hand so hard it hurt. I smiled and nodded like I was in on the joke. Middle management. To a room full of CEOs and board members and people who actually mattered. That's what Harrison thought of me, what he wanted everyone else to think. Inside, I was calculating. By 2014, I owned 32% of his company. 8 more percentage points and I'd have control. Just a few more years of patience. Just a few more years of playing the role he'd assigned me. But the domestic conflict in my marriage was growing. Vivian knew something was wrong. She just couldn't identify what. "Why don't you ever push back?" she asked one night after another humiliating dinner. "It doesn't bother me." "It bothers me. Garrett, you're brilliant. You work so hard. Why do you let him treat you this way?" "Because I'm building concealed wealth worth $68 million, and in 4 more years, I'll own more of his company than he does. Because I'm not interested in winning arguments. I'm interested in winning the war." But I couldn't say that. So I said nothing, and the distance between us grew wider. In 2019, my father died. Heart failure. He was 68 years old. I drove to Queens for the funeral, my first visit in 3 years. I'd been too busy before, too focused on the plan, too consumed with managing my shadowy portfolio and tracking every share purchase and watching Harrison's empire slowly become mine. The funeral home was small, linoleum floors, folding chairs. Men from the delivery drivers union told stories about him. Honest work, simple life, always helped others when they needed it. My uncle pulled me aside after the service. "Your dad was proud of you, Said you married well, got a good job at that shipping company. He bragged about you at the Union Hall, said his boy was doing real good." Something twisted in my chest. The air felt too thin. My father died thinking I made $127,000 a year, that I was doing okay, that I'd married into a good family. He never knew about the $78 million in hidden assets, never knew about the 17-year plan, never knew his son had become exactly the kind of person he'd spent his life resenting, the kind who thought money and power mattered more than people. At the grave, I stood alone after everyone left, cold November wind cutting through my coat. "I'm sorry, Dad," I whispered to the dirt. "I'm sorry I didn't visit more. I'm sorry you died thinking I was ashamed of you. I'm sorry I became everything you hated about rich people." My father had driven a delivery truck for 30 years. He'd been honest, straightforward, content with a simple life. He'd taught me that character mattered more than cash, that you measured a man by how he treated people, not by his bank balance. And I'd spent 16 years ignoring every lesson he'd tried to teach me. The wind carried my words away, just like the years I'd never get back with him. I didn't tell Vivian about any of this when I got home, just said the funeral was fine, and went back to my study to review our latest share acquisitions. We'd hit 39.1% ownership, just 3 more percentage points until I had more control than Harrison. 5 more years until the endgame. 5 more years of pretending to be someone I wasn't. My father had been dead for 72 hours, and all I could think about was the plan. That should have been my wake-up call. That should have been the moment I realized what this family feud was costing me, what I was becoming, what I'd already lost. But I was too close to victory to stop, too committed to the long game to see that I was losing everything that actually mattered. The family warfare was approaching its climax, and I was about to discover that winning and succeeding are not the same thing. February 2024. I woke up at 3 a.m. with crushing chest pain. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. My left arm was numb. Every heartbeat felt like someone driving a nail through my sternum. Vivian woke to me gasping beside her. "Garrett! Garrett!" The ER, fluorescent lights, beeping machines, nurses moving with controlled urgency, tests, blood draws, EKG, CT scan, hours of waiting while I kept thinking, not now, not when I'm this close. I was at 41.8% ownership. Harrison was at 38.1%, just 0.3% more, and I could form a controlling coalition with board members who were tired of his autocratic leadership. The endgame was 6 weeks away. I couldn't die now. The doctor came back around 7 a.m. Young, tired, blunt. Not a heart attack, severe anxiety attack. But Mr. Thorne, your cortisol levels are dangerously high. Your blood pressure is 168/104. How much stress are you under? Normal work stress, I lied. He looked at me like I'd just told him the sky was green. This isn't normal. Your body is eating itself from the inside. You're 45 years old with the stress markers of a 60-year-old CEO during a hostile takeover. He paused. Is there a hostile takeover? Closer than he knew. I need you to take a month off work, therapy, possibly medication. Your body is telling you something, Mr. Thorne. You need to listen. I was back at work the next week. The board meeting was 6 weeks away. I couldn't stop now, not after 16 years, not when victory was so close I could taste it. Vivian begged me to slow down. Whatever you're chasing at that company, it's not worth dying for. I'm fine. You're not fine. Her voice cracked. You haven't been fine in years, and I don't know how to help you because you won't tell me what's wrong. I wanted to tell her. Opened my mouth. The truth was right there, had been building for 16 years, pressing against my teeth like a scream. Just work stress, I said instead. She looked at me for a long moment. Something died in her eyes. Okay, Garrett, if that's what you want to, tell me. She stopped asking after that. The distance between us became a canyon. March 20th, 2024. 3 days after we crossed the 42% threshold, 3 days after 16 years of patient secret investments had finally accumulated into controlling interest. Morton's Steakhouse, the same restaurant where we'd celebrated hundreds of occasions, the same table by the window. Harrison, Vivian, and me. The waitress placed the check between us, $247 for 3 people. Harrison reached for it the way he'd reached for every check for 16 years. I'll get this one, Garrett. But this time, I didn't let him. My hand caught his wrist. Not hard, just firm enough. Actually, Harrison, I'd like to pay tonight. His hand froze. Vivian's eyes widened. For the first time in 16 years, Harrison Ashford looked directly at me. Not through me, not past me. At me. That's very generous, Garrett, but there's no need. I insist. I placed my credit card on the check. In fact, I have something I need to discuss with both of you about Ashford Maritime. The company? Harrison's smile faded. What about it? I've been buying shares through various entities over the past 16 years. Quietly, patiently, building hidden assets that nobody knew about. The silence at that table was absolute. A waiter dropped a tray somewhere across the room. Neither of them noticed. How many shares? Harrison's voice was very quiet, very controlled. 42.1% of outstanding shares, which, if I'm calculating correctly, is more than you own. All the color drained from Harrison's face. Vivian stared at me like I'd grown a second head. That's impossible, Harrison said. Those purchases would have been disclosed. Not if they're structured properly. Not if you use shell companies and trusts and keep each purchase under the reporting thresholds. Not if you're patient and careful and willing to spend 16 years building concealed wealth that nobody knows exists. Harrison's hand clenched around his water glass. You manipulative son of a... Careful, Harrison. I kept my voice level, calm. Your blood pressure. You're 71 years old. Vivian found her voice. It was barely a whisper. Garrett, what are you talking about? 16 years? We've been married 16 years. I know. I looked at her, and for the first time in our marriage, I let her see the real me, the person I'd been hiding. I started buying shares right after our engagement party, right after your father handed me that prenup and made it very clear he expected me to fail, expected me to quit, expected me to take some settlement money and disappear. I turned back to Harrison. I decided to prove you wrong in the most definitive way possible. Harrison stood up abruptly, chair scraping. I'm calling my lawyers. Call them, I said. They'll confirm what I'm telling you. Every purchase was legal. Every structure was proper. Every share was acquired through legitimate means. You can't undo 16 years of patient accumulation just because you don't like the result. Why? Vivian's voice broke. Why would you do this? The honest answer surprised even me. Because your father spent 16 years treating me like I was nothing, like I was some guy who married above his station and should be grateful for scraps from his table. Every check, every comment, every subtle reminder that I wasn't good enough. I stood up, pulled out cash, enough to cover the bill and a generous tip, and I decided to prove him wrong. I looked at Harrison. His face had gone from pale to red to purple. I've scheduled a board meeting for Wednesday. I assume you'll be there. We have a lot to discuss about the company's future direction. You can't just take over my company. I'm not taking over anything. I'm exercising my rights as the largest shareholder. Perfectly legal, perfectly legitimate. Exactly the kind of asset protection strategy a good lawyer would recommend. I placed the cash on the table. The check's on me tonight, Harrison. In fact, all the checks are on me from now on. I walked out of Morton's Steakhouse, leaving behind 16 years of Sunday dinners, 16 years of condescension, 16 years of playing a role. Behind me, I heard Vivian calling my name. I kept walking. The family feud had reached its conclusion. Now I had to face what I'd destroyed to get here. The board meeting lasted 3 hours. Harrison's lawyers tried everything, questioned the legitimacy of my corporate structures, demanded investigations, threatened lawsuits. Tom Desmond had prepared for all of it. By 5 p.m., it was done. I had controlling interest. Harrison would remain as chairman emeritus, a title with no real power. The company would implement the modernization plan I'd been developing for years. Harrison Ashford walked out of that boardroom a defeated man. I walked out victorious. It felt nothing like I'd imagined. Vivian didn't come home that night. She stayed at her father's penthouse. For 3 days, I heard nothing. Thursday night, she came home. I was in the study, The same study where I'd spent 16 years managing my secret investments. When I heard the front door, she stood in the doorway. I barely recognized the expression on her face. Not anger, something worse. Betrayal. 16 years, she said. 16 years you lied to me. I never lied. You kept a secret that defined our entire marriage. That's the same thing. Her voice cracked. Do you have any idea how this feels? Finding out that my whole life has been… what? A chess move in your game against my father? It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? When you proposed? When we bought this house? When we decided things? Was any of it real? The money was part of a strategy. You never were. How do I trust anything you say now? She sat down heavily. When did it start? The lying, the hiding, the engagement party, when your father handed me that prenup. That was before we were even married. She looked at me like she didn't know me. You spent our entire marriage on this. Then her voice changed, became smaller, more broken. You know what the worst part is, Garrett? The children we never had. I froze. I'm 44 years old. That window closed. You kept saying, let's wait until we're more financially stable. But we could have afforded kids years ago, couldn't we? I couldn't look at her. Couldn't we, Garrett? Or was that another lie? Another piece of your strategy? I wanted the plan to be complete first. The plan. She laughed, but it sounded like crying. Always the fucking plan. Do you know what I did last month? I went to Emma's baby shower. Her daughter is having her first child. Emma's going to be a grandmother, and I have nothing. Because my husband spent 16 years playing chess with my father instead of living our life. Vivienne? I wanted to be a mother. You took that from me. For what? To prove a point to a man who'll be dead in 10 years anyway? The words hung in the air between us like smoke. I need time, she finally said. I need to figure out if there's anything left to save. She walked to the guest bedroom. I heard the door close. We lived in the same house for the next month like strangers. Then she moved out. I sold my shares, not all of them, kept 15% for a board seat. Sold 27% back to an employee ownership trust at cost, not the premium I could have demanded. Harrison's lawyers spent months looking for the catch. There wasn't one. I was simply done. The $73 million from the sale? I set up a foundation in my father's name. Full scholarships for working-class kids who want to study business. No strings attached. Vivienne and I divorced. Not bitterly. We'd had enough bitterness for a lifetime. She remarried last year, a pediatrician named David who volunteers with Doctors Without Borders. They're expecting a child through IVF and a surrogate. She'll be 46 when the baby comes. She sent me a photo of the ultrasound. I cried for an hour. Harrison died 6 months ago. Heart attack at 73. I went to the funeral, sat in the back. Vivienne saw me, nodded once. I nodded back. I felt nothing. That's how I knew I was finally free. I'm 47 now. Live in Queens, same neighborhood where I grew up. Work as a consultant for small businesses. Make about $80,000 a year. Enough. Last week, I visited Dad's grave for the first time in 3 years. I finally figured it out, Dad, I said to the headstone. You were right. You had it right the whole time. Honest work. Simple life. Real relationships. That's what matters. I built an empire to prove I wasn't nobody. Turns out being nobody isn't the insult I thought it was. You were somebody, Dad. You were somebody to the people who loved you. That's everything I threw away. The wind rustled through the cemetery trees. If you're watching this Reddit story and planning revenge on someone who wronged you, stop. Go home. Hug your wife. Call your kids. Visit your aging parents while they're still here. Because here's what I learned about family feuds and hidden assets and 17-year plans. You always pay more than you win. I spent 16 years building concealed wealth and proving a point. Know what I should have been building? Memories, trust, love, a family. Those are the real assets, and you can't buy them back. Harrison Ashford treated me like I was nothing. He was wrong, but I spent 16 years letting him define me anyway. I gave him 16 years of my mental energy, my youth, my marriage. I won the battle and lost everything that mattered. The opposite of hate isn't love, it's indifference. Real freedom would have been not caring what Harrison thought, walking away, building my own life on my own terms. Instead, I played his game, and by the time I won, I'd become him. I'm Garrett Thorne. I won the 16-year-long game against my father-in-law. It was the stupidest thing I ever did, but I'm finally learning to lose correctly. Learning that sometimes the bravest thing isn't winning, it's walking away. Learning that the best revenge isn't success. It's living well without needing revenge at all. I just wish I'd learned it 17 years earlier.